informal virtual webinars just as a chance for us to touch base on some topics of interest for radiologists, members of the community, people in training, so residents, medical students, undergrads, I guess, and such. So welcome to everyone who's joining us online. We're really excited to talk with you all today. There will be the opportunity to share your questions in the chat as we go through. So feel free to just type in any questions you may have. I'll give a chance for all of our panelists to introduce themselves today. I guess I'll start to my right. Mitva, do you want to say hello?
Yes, hi, thanks. I'm Mitva Patel. I'm a breast imaging radiologist from Ohio State University. I am an associate professor and, like I said, specialize in breast imaging. I'm really excited about this topic today. I want to thank Toma for coming up with this topic. It's something that I think all breast radiologists, we talk about it. Breast is best and how we love what we do probably every single day more than anything else. So I think this will be a great conversation and I look forward to it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Margaret Jacobozzi. I'm a breast imager at Wake Forest and also fellowship director here. And I'm really excited too. I think this is a great topic. As a breast imager, I do only breast imaging. So it's something I feel passionate about and I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome.
And I'm Rachel Pricer. I am a breast imager and I'm in private practice. I'm just taking over the role of director of breast imaging for Mercy One Northeast Iowa. So it's really fun. And I agree. I've done 2 fellowships. I did MSK first and then breast afterwards because I just loved it so much. And breast really is best.
Well, thank you for proving our point, Rachel. Thank you. So, the premise behind this topic is really that in a lot of ways, I think breast radiology is a hidden gem of medical subspecialties. Many people are not really aware of radiology as a field while they're undergrads, while they're in medical school for the most part. And because radiology is not one of the core rotations, most people don't even discover radiology until they're doing electives in the 4th year. And it's an elective, so people may never even have the opportunity to rotate in a radiology department. And then when you think about that, it means that whatever experience people have of radiology is often just based off of stereotypes, what they've seen on the news and the media, some person in a dark room that growls anytime there's a request for human interaction. And it's really very far from the truth. So this topic gives us a chance to, break open the curtain, open up the curtain to discuss why breast radiology is so wonderful. I think that a career in medical imaging is something that's unusual, but I do think it's a wonderful way to serve patients. And so we're going to jump in. So I'm going to start by asking all of you, why did you choose breast radiology? And maybe we should start with Rachel, because you had the experience of choosing something else first.
I did. It was kind of interesting. I was already signed up for my fellowship. It was all lined up before I'd ever had a breast rotation. And so I was the very last person in my class, my 2nd year of residency, to go through breast. And it was like, June of that year. And I went on my breast fellowship. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I always knew I was doing private practice. I'm a Midwesterner, and I research it, I do it, but it's not like what really is my passion. And so I knew I was heading into that. So I stuck with my MSK fellowship because I like it. But it was an aha moment on that breast imaging rotation. And when I started to look for jobs during my MSK fellowship, I kept looking at all the open breast jobs, and like those are the ones I wanted. And so I happened to find an unexpected opening in a breast imaging fellowship and convinced my husband that no, I wasn't going to get a real job. I was going to do another year of fellowship, and it was probably the best decision I've ever made.
Oh, what happened to Rachel, I don't think is very unusual. That's one of the reasons why in our residency program, we've started to introduce residents to breast at the R1 stage, because that did frequently happen. residents would be R3s or, late in their R2s and felt that they could not back out from a fellowship, which is great.
Yeah.
You don't want to back out from a commitment that you've made. But they just said, we didn't realize that we would love it so much, and the experience just came so late in their training.
Right.
So I think programs are trying to get residents in earlier, and I think it can also be a problem. I've also noticed it a problem with residents matching into IR radiology, so IR residencies, because I think there's this notion that patient contact only happens in IR.
Right.
And we actually have some IR residents that said, oh, I wish I would have known as a medical student that breast imaging has so much patient contact and you do biopsies. So I'm so glad we're talking about this today. So hopefully if there's medical students that want to do radiology but still want some patient contact, they don't think it's just IR. The breast imaging has that. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit more. So
I think it's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it is a great point. And I'll ask you, because you have the experience personally and as a program director, why do you think people choose breast radiology? What are some of the things that attract people to breast radiology that you're finding is the stimulant that changes the minds of these medical students?
I think it's the patient contact, right? So I think that that's a big portion, and I also think procedures is a big part of our job. I think most breast radiologists do enjoy doing procedures. That small amount of patient contact that we get during a biopsy, and sort of that longitudinal care. So to me, I feel like residents and medical students who show interest in breast imaging, time and time again, they say that they like the variety and they like to be able to have those two things that you might not get in other, subspecialties in radiology. And I'm not saying that you don't have any patient contact, but it is definitely more in breast imaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. What do you think, Margaret?
And so I agree with what's been said. We've had so many fellows come through that almost did a different fellowship, and then their second, third year, they decide, hey, wait, I like this. This is my first breast rotation. And then I think it's nice when you can get the residents hands-on doing biopsies and that sort of thing. That really gets them excited. Talking to patients. At my institution, we do our own ultrasounds, so they get to do a physical exam, do the ultrasound, meet a lot of different patients. So I think that is really exciting for the residents. And if you like that sort of thing, it's a really, I think quickly if it's a good fit. And people have switched from, I'm going to do neuro to breast. It sounds very different, but you don't know unless you have the experience. So I think it's great to hear that some places are exposing residents so quickly to breast imaging. And for me, I like the patient interaction, of course, and I love doing procedures. I think also the problem solving is really fun too. You do the physical exam, you problem solve with all different modalities and emerging technologies. And it's just really fun to kind of solve the puzzle and get the diagnosis and do your part in the cancer care.
I agree. I'll say for me, I went into radiology pretty much knowing I was going to do breast, but I didn't know I was going into radiology. So I actually was a fourth year medical student who had already applied in the match in internal medicine and was going to be an oncologist. I had all of these interviews lined up. I think I had about 7 interviews lined up, and thought I'm going to do the radiology rotation so I can read chest x-rays as an intern. And I walked into that rotation. It was late September, and I loved the problem solving, like Margaret is saying. It felt like it was such an eye-opening experience. People could look at these images and tell so much about a patient and solve all these problems. So I really was enjoying it. And my friend at the time said, maybe you need to switch your application here to radiology. And I thought that was nuts until the day that I walked into, on this elective, I walked into the breast radiology reading room, and it was like coming home. I mean, first of all, breast imaging, the work is really impactful, right? Your question is always, is this breast cancer or not? So every interaction feels really important, and people are, they're really engaged in what they're doing. Your colleagues are engaged, the patients are engaged, the referring physicians are engaged, the questions are important, right? So it feels like you're doing meaningful work. But beyond that, I also felt like the people who had selected to become breast radiologists were also people who are really empathetic, right? They're very smart, but had incredible interpersonal skills. And so you could walk into the room and become one of their team members. So even till now, I tell medical students when they reach out and say, I'm interested in doing research with a radiologist, I don't know how to approach anyone in my institution, I'll say, you know what, find a breast radiologist. Go on the website, find one of them and email them. They're nice. They're always nice. And it works. It actually works. It's a really
good
good
advice.
It is. It's a really good entry into radiology in general. So I think it's a great field. Now, one thing that kind of came to the surface for me as you all were talking is that we do see a lot of people switch from other specialties into radiology, or specifically even into breast radiology. Are you aware of a lot of breast radiologists who are switching out of the specialty, or people who are dissatisfied?
No. I've never heard of that happening. But I can tell you off the top of my head of almost 10 people who switched from neuro or MSK into breast. But I've never heard it go the other way.
See, there you go. I rest my case. We're done. That's the. I'm kidding.
That's a great point. Yes.
True. Saying about having that experience as a med student, because even though I knew I went to med school to be a radiologist, like I knew that's what I wanted, which is kind of unusual. But even knowing that and taking all the electives in radiology I could, and all of that stuff, I never set foot into a breast reading room until I was a second year radiology resident. And I wonder if, we did a better job as breast imagers in reaching those med students. I wonder if we could get people to even consider radiology that weren't, and even just getting more breast imagers out, because we need more of us. There just aren't enough of us to go around. And it's a wonderful career.
Absolutely. So what would somebody find when they walked into the breast radiology reading room? What is a day in the life of a breast radiologist? Can y'all share about that?
I think it's a mix of interpretation of studies. So sometimes there's some quiet time where you have to, look at screening mammograms, diagnostic mammograms. There's a lot of interaction with technologists. So I feel like it's more of a problem solving thing. So the technologist might present a case to you and you work with your tech to try to figure out the problem. And then you talk to the patient about the results. And then sometimes there's biopsies too. So for us, we have a large enough group that we can say that somebody is, scheduled to be on ultrasound-guided biopsies all day, and they are going to be doing those biopsies. We do also read some screening exams in between, but we have assignments of the day. But I think in smaller practices, you might do a little bit of everything every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to have the variety. When you're on screening, it's quiet, dark room, you're focused on that one thing. And then if you're doing something else, we mix biopsies and diagnostics together. So you're up, you're doing things, ultrasounds, procedures, and, teaching is a part of for us too, because we have residents and medical students. So it's nice to have a variety of different days as well. So every day isn't just sitting in front of a computer interpreting studies. You do that sometimes, but a lot of times you're up interacting with patients and doing procedures.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about being a breast imager is that I talk all day. You are always talking, whether it's to your technologists or patients or, talking to pathologists, like all day long you were talking. And it's at the end of the day, you're tired of talking. At least I am. I'm kind of an introvert. But it's great because you really do form those relationships. And the variety is what keeps people in love with the specialty. I remember a couple of years ago, I overheard a couple of my partners. One of them was at the end of the career. One was about my stage of career. And they were both kind of lamenting that they're kind of bored. They're like, when's the last time you saw something new? Mm-hmm. And I'm never bored, because even though the question is always the same, it always presents differently. There's always some new little facet, or your patient has a different goal than your last patient, even if they have the exact same diagnosis. And there's always something to troubleshoot. And you're always coming at it in a fresh way. And so I've never been bored in breast imaging. And I think that's why people love it. People stick with it. Mm-hmm. And people don't want to retire from it because it's so much fun.
Yeah. And what are your work days like, each of you? How many hours do you work in a day or in a week?
So I don't do nights. I don't do weekends, which is lovely, especially with kids. It's really hard to find that kind of schedule as an expectation. And as a mom, it's awesome, because I know that I'm going to be there for that soccer game. I usually start about 7:30, and 5:30 you're heading home. Sometimes it's a little bit later if you're like preparing a tumor board and you've had a busy day or something like that. But for the most part, it's very reasonable as far as what your expectations are. Mm-hmm. You're working really hard the whole time, but it's confined.
Yeah, mine is similar. It's 8 to 5 is the work day. Pretty busy the whole day, but after that, no weekend call, no evenings, holidays, and so that's really nice. I'm also part-time, so I think that it's something all radiologists could potentially do, but I think that I wouldn't say that that a lot of breast imagers are part-time. I would say there's part-time radiologists in all subspecialties, but I think that that's nice as well.
And mine is similar to what you guys are saying, basically 8 to 5 weekdays. Yeah.
Am I the only one who does any clinical work on weekends? Am I the only one? So it is unusual, I will say, but we do have some breast imaging services available on Saturdays, usually for a half day. It helps provide access for some of those patients who really cannot take off work to come to the doctor for an extended visit. Imagine you're trying to get, diagnostic mammogram and ultrasound and biopsy. That's a huge chunk of time that a lot of patients really cannot take off. So having the Saturday appointments is beneficial. And yes, we're the radiologists. It means that we do have some of those sessions where we have to work on Saturdays, but thankfully not too frequently that we have to do that. And again, ultimately, you're really often working with patients who are grateful that you're there because they've been trying to figure out a way to get seen for a while. And so they're typically really grateful that you've made that extra effort for access. So does anyone take any call in your groups?
We take call for, if a breast ultrasound needs to be done from the emergency room, but mostly we can read those remotely.
And so in my group, I most recently was in a multi-specialty clinic, and so we were all outpatient. So there was nothing to service overnight. There's no, ER, CT scanner. We did occasionally, like once a month, do screenings on Saturdays, but we would just come in early on Monday and read those. So we didn't have to come in on the weekends. Where I'm transitioning to, I have the option to take pager call for procedures if I want to for extra money, but it's not an expectation of breast imagers. But I've seen all sorts of things. I have a lot of friends, and some people are part of the general pool for call over the ER, and you just kind of read what you're comfortable with. Some people are just doing plain films. Others will do some cross-sectional, and it's a handful of times a year. But I think even if you want to go into academics and you want to do breast imaging, it's still important to have a well-rounded radiology experience and to kind of keep those skills up, because you never know what might happen. There might be a merger and all of a sudden you're now covering a small hospital that you didn't sign up for, but you're part of the call pool again. So you never know. Things can always change. And it's good to have, those skills in your back pocket.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes students also ask about working from home, and
About to
we don't have the ability. Were you about to talk about that? We don't have
No,
the
I
ability
love
in our practice to work from home, and I think that some people who prioritize that, other subspecialties in radiology, I know it's easier to do that. Because we see patients and we do biopsies, we do have to be in the office for those. But I know that there's some practices where they're able to read some cases from home, breast MR, maybe even some screens from home, but we actually are not set up to do so. I don't know whether any of you guys are.
Do any of you all work from home or have the ability to in your practices?
No. I think part of the thing too is that in breast imaging, we need special monitors to read the images. So that limits kind of access to those
They're
stations.
very expensive.
Yeah.
They're more expensive than a car.
They're very expensive and they have to be maintained. So they're expensive and they're high maintenance.
Yes.
I will say I saw a lot of conversation online and just anecdotally from friends during COVID where some of these breast imagers had family members, either parents or kids at home that they needed to be home with, and their practices were making effort to create home workstations for them and craft some rotations where they could, like you're saying, read screens from home or breast MR from home. And I will say that I think the job market is so favorable right now for any breast radiologist that if that was a significant need of yours, you probably could talk a practice into having some percentage of your time be working from home.
Yeah. And I will say, I know of some friends who have been kind of dipping their toe into telemammography, especially for underserved areas. If there's a place where it's like a 5-hour drive to your closest big city, it's really awesome that they can actually talk to a diagnostic radiologist in their hometown because maybe they can't make that drive. So I know there are a couple companies that are looking into offering those services, and that's a lot of screening, but a little bit of diagnostics too, being done from home. So that's definitely an option that's out there. It's not super prevalent, but some people are working on that problem.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing I noticed, if I think back to my experience as a medical student in that breast radiology reading room, was there were so many interruptions. There was just interruption after interruption after interruption. So I'm going to pose it to you guys. When you're a breast imager, you're in the flow. What are some of the character traits I think that you think makes for a good breast imaging radiologist, and you think this person is going to be able to go with the flow of breast clinic?
I think good communication skills. I think you mentioned being empathetic. But I also think some of the best breast radiologists I know are very meticulous, and they just pay attention to all the details, and they're able to keep all those, those findings in order and to formulate their plan for their patients. But I do find interruptions challenging. Sometimes I want to just finish what I'm doing. So I think I think later on in here, you might be asking what's the best and worst part of your job. And that's what I was thinking is interruptions. I enjoy talking to technologists and patients and students, but also I find that challenging. Sometimes I just want to finish the task I'm doing. So I don't know.
I think organization is a big thing too, because several times throughout the day, you will have multiple things going on at once, and being able to kind of keep everything organized to help you remember what's going on with each of those tasks is really important.
Yeah, and I echo both of those things. I mean, you will be interrupted about 100 times a day, if not more. So being able to come up with strategies that work for you are really important. Whether that's having consistency in your templates and reports, so you know that if you stop at a certain point, that you've looked at this portion of the exam, and just being able to kind of know what you have done. I typically dictate as I go. If I'm doing a diagnostic, I will dictate that, whatever I say to a tech gets put in the report and it's saved until they come back, and then we finish it up. And so just keeping track of everything you've done, being organized, detail-oriented. There are lots of details to keep track of. And sometimes they are important to link them together and figure out, okay, how do these two things work simultaneously? But yeah, it's fun. That's part of what keeps it interesting.
I love that you went into strategies. So you try to dictate as you go. That's one strategy for keeping up with the workflow. Any other strategies for organization that you all are employing, or strategies to minimize interruptions that you're employing to help your workday go smoother?
I also dictate as I go. I use checklists. I always have this sheet of paper in front of me, and if something is undone, I make a note, and I don't leave until all my boxes are checked for the day. It's simple, but it works for me.
Yeah, I'll make notes. If a patient has to go to ultrasound from a diagnostic mammogram, I'm making a note of exactly what I thought and where I need to look on that ultrasound. So I keep track of that patient. I don't let anything get lost as I'm moving on, maybe to the next mammogram.
Yeah, I love the writing it down. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, I think just you get a sense for how your day flows, and every day is different depending on how your scheduling templates go. But I think doing the same things at the same time every day, like I would always try to read my MRIs for the morning. I wouldn't read them as they would come in. I would read them right before lunch, because that's going to be the time where I have the fewest interruptions, and I could go into the lunch hour for the things that are complicated. And so just kind of figuring out when are my pockets where I'm going to have like the most time to really dive into complicated things, or when do I want to make patient phone calls? Make them at the same time every day, so you have some consistency in what you're doing, and that also helps make sure you never forget. I've never forgotten to call a patient, knock on wood, in 10 years, because I always do it at the same time every single day, and it's right before I go home or right before I eat lunch, depending on when. And that way I know I can't take a bite of my sandwich, or I can't pack my bag to go home until I have checked off every single phone call. And I think that just helps get all of the things, the little tiny things, it helps get them ordered.
I love that. I read all these books about efficiency and personal effectiveness and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things they talk about is having your focus time for deep work, right? One author refers to it as tiger time. The tiger time where you just need to get in the flow, no interruptions. You're doing the most critical, sensitive work, but it takes the most out of you. And so it's really interesting to hear you talk, because essentially breast MRI is your tiger time. And that's you're doing that right before lunch break, without any interruptions. So that's actually kind of a cool way to look at it. I always had positioned tiger time in my head around writing manuscripts and getting focus time for that, but it builds into the workflow too. Very cool. So as you work as a breast imager, I'll say that one strategy we've employed in our practice to minimize interruptions is we now use online messaging platforms for all of our communications with technologists, or the vast majority of it. And that helps in several ways. Number one, the entire conversation about a patient is in one thread, right? So you're keeping track of everything that you've looked at with that patient. But it also minimizes interruptions, because, you get that ding, and you can determine if you want to finish that thought, finish that sentence before you go and respond to the ding, which is helpful. And then, some of our facilities, we have shared workrooms. And if you're sharing a workroom with another radiologist, you get interrupted when a technologist walks in to talk to them, right? So that also kind of interrupts your flow. So when they're getting notified just by online messaging, you're getting more focus time to do your work as well. So it's been really beneficial. We started this during COVID to kind of minimize interactions between members of the team, but I think pretty much everyone in our group has really enjoyed it. So we've continued to use the online messaging for it. So it's been really beneficial.
That sounds amazing.
Sorry?
No, that sounds amazing.
Is she frozen? I feel
She's
like.
frozen.
Yeah. Will you say that again, Rachel? I think you froze.
Oh, I was just saying that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And I think the other benefit with using that is as you go to dictate, all of your conversation is another way of checking off your list, right? Before you sign off on the patient. It's like, oh yeah, what did I say about those calcs or something? And then you can delete it and close that tab in your head, and it's done, it's shut. So it's been a helpful one to minimize interruptions for us.
So does your ultrasound technologist also then jump and add onto the chat? I really like that.
They do. And in fact, they can follow the chat as well. So, they can see the chat we had with the mammotech, and I can say, okay, this area spotted out, but take another look. And this area, I'm worried about a cancer, or I think this will need a biopsy. And so that's also there for them. It's like a mini summary before they start scanning, and then they can kind of close the loop and add onto that thread.
That's great.
Do you annotate then on the images, or is it just typed in?
We can annotate on the images, certainly on the packs, or you can copy the annotated images and put them in the chat if you want. I don't do that. Some people do. I think the techs we work with most commonly are pretty experienced, so they can see it off of the packs. But it's also helpful for me, I'll say, because the other interruptions we used to get was off of email. You would be working, and then there might be clinicians sending emails, or they're trying to add on a patient for the day, and that's coming in through your email, and you would get text messages from clinics and all those kinds of things as you're working. So it also meant that you had multiple different tabs you were trying to pay attention to, in addition to the technologist in front of you. Now more and more people are just messaging us on that online messaging chat. So it's just one thing I have to keep track of, because once you open your email, yes, you respond to the clinician, but you may also have 10 other administrative things that are sitting there in email begging for your attention and that you really would not like to focus on right now. So it's been nice to really streamline the interruptions that way.
I love that.
So I think Mitha kind of alluded to this earlier, but we'll go over there now more fully. What would you say, the best and worst parts of your role as a breast radiologist?
I can say one of the worst parts of being a breast radiologist is I do find that there is a certain level of stress, and anxiety, and the idea of missing a cancer. I think that weighs on all breast radiologists' mind. I think probably in all of radiology, but certainly in breast radiology, we worry because interpreting a mammogram is difficult. It's a complex study, and I think that it takes a lot of time to get good at it. And even once you're an expert in the field and you're very good at it, there still can be some misses. So I think one exciting thing, so it's a negative part, but I think one thing that I'm excited about and that we're looking forward to the future is maybe some advances in technology to help us to be more sensitive. So, all these people are talking about advances with AI and how, just to let students know that it's not going to replace a breast radiologist, but it's actually going to make us better. And I think that it's going to probably decrease some of the stress levels for reading that screening mammogram if we have computer-aided detection, AI rather than CAT helping us.
Yeah.
I think one of the best parts is when you feel like you really made a difference. You found something on a study that is really going to change management, or you found a cancer when it's very small and it's really going to impact patient care. I think that, that's why we all do this, right? That's the most rewarding thing. What I dislike the most is we're all very empathetic, and when you have that patient with a neglected cancer, it's hard to see that, and you just wish they would have come in earlier, gotten screening, or when they first felt something. So I think that's what I dislike the most.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. The patients are the best part. Sometimes you'll be at the grocery store and you'll run into somebody you took care of years ago, and you saw them on the worst day of their life, and they're thriving. And I love that. I really, really love that. It's hard to have that conversation, that breast cancer conversation. But I think if you can do it well, you can make the worst day of someone's life a little bit better. Because you might have that conversation multiple times a day, but they're going to remember that conversation for the rest of their life. So it's important. And I love that I can kind of take the edge off of that for someone and be there and be compassionate with them. I agree with all the worst parts that everyone's already said. One of my worst parts that has not yet been talked about is insurance companies. I live in a state that does not have mandated coverage. And so it just breaks my heart when I have conversations with people who have dense breasts or who are at high risk. And I say, this is what we would recommend, but they have a high deductible insurance and they just can't afford it. They can't afford to be there for their diagnostic, let alone high-risk screening breast MRI. And I hate having those conversations. And so that's something that I'm starting to dip my toe in my state is, advocacy with state legislature to how do we fix that? Because, we did this big push for breast density legislation, but it's not actually having an impact because we didn't put our money where our mouth is. So that kind of leads into another thing of, what are some other things you can do with breast imaging? You can, you can become a lobbyist of sorts. You can do all sorts of stuff. I think if you identify a pressure point, that's something that causes you pain every day, that's a perfect opportunity to dive into a project.
I love that. I love everything that you said. I love this idea of taking a situation that is bad. It's bad for this patient to hear that they have breast cancer. It's hard for you to have that conversation and framing it in such a positive way by saying not, oh, this is nothing, don't worry about it, but framing it in a positive way of saying, I'm going to be good at giving bad news. I'm going to learn how to give bad news well. You're absolutely right. I think that is a brilliant way of looking at it. And when you said that, I remember that one of the absolute highlights of my career, we all love getting feedback from patients, just a thank you card or an email down the line. But one of the most precious messages I've ever received from a patient was somebody who was diagnosed with cancer. She said, thank you for sharing it so kindly. It was so poignant because it wasn't I'm through treatment, I'm at the end, yay. It was, I'm still in this, but I think that you put some effort into sharing this in a thoughtful way. So I think that's really brilliant. So even in the worst part of being a breast radiologist, there is an opportunity to still be impactful and kind to a patient in a way, like you said, that they'll remember forever. And then I'll ask you about lobbying. So is this something that you do as an individual? Are you doing this through your group? Are you doing this through a National Radiology Society? How did you get involved with lobbying as a breast radiologist?
So there are many breast radiologists who have a lot more experience. I am very much a novice in this. And I got involved just by forming relationships with patients. And I would see them at a breast cancer walk. And we have something in Iowa called Iowa Army of Pink. And they were a group of patients that did breast. Some of them had missed cancers, and they lobbied for the breast cancer density laws. And so now we're going to try to get money. And so you just start talking to people. That's all lobbying is. It's talking to people about something you're passionate about. So I started with my local, medical society, and I showed up to one of their days at the Hill. And on my day off, this was not something sanctioned by my group. It was just, I have a day off. It lined up, so I went, and I just started talking to people and having those conversations. And then you follow up with them and you send them articles, and nothing happens overnight. I just started doing this in earnest about a year ago. And so not even a year ago, maybe like 6 months ago. But you have the conversation once, and then you have it again and again, and maybe you have a conversation with the right person and they happen to be in the right room and they're able to tack something onto a bill that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And so it's just talking to people who are in positions of power about something you're passionate about and doing it again and again and again until it sticks.
I love it. Breast radiology beyond the reading room. Yeah. So, what are some of the other roles, some of the other unique roles that you guys are involved in beyond clinical work?
I think there's always patient outreach and education. I think you were alluding to that before, that, we go to some of these breast cancer walks, we go to some of these educational sessions and provide information, because there is so much incorrect information on screening recommendations out there. So it's our job, it's our responsibility as breast radiologists to get out there and to educate patients and the public about screening and breast density laws and supplemental screening for high-risk women and women with dense breasts. So I think that that's something that almost all breast radiologists really do as well. That's aside from the clinical work.
Right. And I would say the same thing. Patient outreach is really important. It's key to getting the message out there, and also educating our referrers as well. If we want people to start getting a mammogram at 40 and yearly, that's going to take agreement by their family doctor, for example, or whoever's overseeing their care.
Yeah. And you're big on social media and social media outreach. How did you get started doing that, and why do you do that?
Well, so I have an Instagram account, Breast Imaging, and what we do is we show cases, some cancer, some not. And what we did is there was another radiologist at our institution who did a similar thing for nuclear medicine. And we said, myself and a colleague, why not do this for breast imaging? So we started, and it's been really great. I think we have people from all over the world looking at this and learning from it, and we'll get questions and we're able to interact with them and answer those questions. So that's certainly another way to get involved and really get people looking, from the public to trainees and colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of breast radiologists are involved in mentorship. I said earlier that I always tell med students, if they slide in my DMs to ask about mentorship or research, I'm like, yeah, find a breast radiologist at your institution. They're going to help you. And it works. It really works. Education is something that I've been passionate about. And, I'm an immigrant. I'm Nigerian American and have always been interested in global health. And I'm happy to see that there's more and more involvement of breast radiology in global health. And currently, just from collaborating with really passionate radiologists all over the world, we're involved in projects in Tanzania and in the Caribbean and Nigeria and Zambia and all of these really cool things. So as a medical student, I was somebody who was really interested in global health. And I thought, well, if I'm going to radiology, I have to let that go because some of the technology doesn't translate and stuff like that. But that's really not true. I think whatever your passions are, you can be creative enough to figure out how to tie them into radiology and breast radiology specifically.
You're doing that in a few weeks, right?
Yes. I'm heading out in a couple days to Tanzania and then to Angola for some teaching with the RSNA, but also working with some projects out of RAD-Aid. So just a lot of different people doing cool things, and then individual projects from my institution as well with Zambia. So there are just a lot of opportunities out there if you're passionate about something. Or if you have a pain point, you just keep tweaking it, and eventually something gives, and you get to marry your passions, which I think is a great way to also prevent burnout too. You can marry your passions. I know that there are a lot of myths that people have about breast imaging, and so we have to do that. We've got to talk about what's some of the myths about breast imaging and how do you counter them.
I think there's always that myth that I think you maybe alluded to it before, or we talked about it before, is that you have to be very good at physics. I think I honestly was a little bit nervous about this when I chose radiology as a field, but I didn't want that one fear to stop me. And so we do have to learn how the machines work and learn how the technology works. And back in the day, I took an exam just for physics. And so you just studied for that, and that was fine. And I still have some of that knowledge, but I have to admit that it's probably not as good as physicists. But I think a lot of people worry about that. They say I wasn't that great in physics, and how could I possibly be a radiologist? But I don't think that I don't think that you have to be excellent in physics to be a radiologist.
And I'll say, in the years, I'll say in the last 10 years as well, since the change in the physics exam, there's also been this really big push to test clinical physics. What is actually relevant for the radiologist to know when we were taking the straight physics exam that really felt like you were being tested much more closely to the way the medical physicists were being tested. And so like for anything, there is all sorts of materials or resources to help you know what you need to know to pass the exam. And then, they say education is what remains after what was learned is forgotten, right? So the part that you learn and forget is probably not the part you need to use. The part that you need to use remains. So it's part of your workflow. So what are some other myths that you all have heard about?
I would say a myth would be that you're kind of at your desk all day. I think especially even medical students might believe this, because when you take those rotations in radiology, I think it's pretty uncommon for them to go to the breast imaging reading room, or at least not all of them do. And some medical students think that's all of radiology, is just sitting there and looking at images. But, and I think that detracts some people from radiology, because they're not getting really to do much on that rotation. They're more shadowing. But like we talked about earlier, that clearly is not what we're doing in breast imaging. I think that's why some radiology residents, if they get there, think they want to do IR, because they're the only people that interact with patients. But I think once some of these people are introduced to breast imaging, they find out that that's another way to interact with patients and do radiology.
And actually, I think we get more patient interaction than IR, because a lot of times in IR, there's moderate conscious sedation. So your patient's asleep anyway. And our patients are always awake, and we talk with them. And I've had lovely conversations with my patients during biopsy. So I think we get more exposure to people than even interventional radiologists do.
I agree. So I'll ask you all, because we have the opportunity. I mean, what a treat. We've got program directors here. We've got, heads of their practices here. So tell us about how competitive the field is. I know a lot of people who are very worried that breast imaging is very competitive, and worry about being disappointed trying to go into it.
Well, breast radiology in particular, there's more fellowship spots available. So there's always unmatched programs. So I think the vast majority of residents who want to do breast imaging will get a fellowship spot. So in terms of subspecializing in breast, that's really not a problem if you can go anywhere in the country. But radiology itself does tend to fall probably on the more competitive side. I think if that's your passion, you should go after that, and you should apply and work to make your application competitive. But I think that, in the end, you shouldn't make a career choice based on, your thought that you're not going to get in. I don't know. That's just my.
The job market goes up and down. Everything goes up and down. So I think you have to do what you want to do. This is your whole life, so you have to do it. And as far as competitiveness, like you said, I mean, we've seen the numbers for the match is what we do now. There's more spots than people looking for those spots.
And just in general, for radiology or for medical students looking at residency spots, you have to be passionate about it. It's not just residency, it's the rest of your career. And if you are not passionate about something, like, don't pick a specialty just because you think that's the best specialty based on your, scores.
Yeah.
Even if it's a reach for you, if you desperately want to be a radiologist and you are passionate about it, that's going to show. And, it might be harder to get in, but once you're in, you're going to have an awesome time. You're going to be motivated to work because you love it. And, it's going to be great. And, I was somebody who radiology was a bit of a reach for me. I was actually considering dropping out of med school about the time I took my step. So I didn't study for it that much. I did not have scores I'm proud of. But I went ahead and I continued, and I graduated med school, and I was told by people not to even apply to radiology, except for my best friend. She's like, no, you have to. This is what you love. And I'm so glad I listened to her. I'm so glad I, made the reach. And radiology residency was fun, and it was not the challenge that people made it seem like it was going to be, because I loved every minute of it, even like getting killed on call. Like it was like what I was supposed to be doing. So don't let one test prevent you from, reaching for what you really want.
That's awesome. Don't let anything stand in the way of what you want. Go for it.
You just have to make a plan to make it happen.
I love it. Yeah. So what do you guys see as the future of breast radiology? Do you look forward with excitement, with trepidation? Do you think that there are threats to our job security? What do you think?
Well, I'm excited about all the new technology out there. I saw some of it at the SBI meeting, some presentations. Mainly, I'm thinking about AI. And, I think as breast imagers, we've all used CAD, computer-aided detection, and have found, it will often find the cancer, but it finds many other things. So an advance in AI would be great, AI for, tomo, but I don't think it's going to kind of overshadow there being an actual radiologist looking at these images and needing the radiologist for interpretation.
I'm also excited about the advances in technology. I'm hopeful that we can also decrease false positives and the number of biopsies that we end up doing that don't end up being cancer. So I think AI can help with that, and just, advances in technology can help with that. So I think that we are headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And in addition to that, I think there is a space for us to, really hone in on tailoring our screening, and the area of, risk assessment. So many people don't know they're high risk. And I think that, that's an opportunity for us to have a lot of counseling and to help people make more informed decisions about their healthcare. And so, all of these different cogs are kind of coming together to make a really exciting time to be a breast imager. There are a lot of different ways that you can, reach into this area, and whether you like research or teaching or whatever it might be, there's a place for you in breast imaging. There really is.
So you feel like AI is something that frees up time for us to do more exciting, important, patient-facing work, is what I'm hearing? Okay.
A computer can't, be compassionate. So, we're not going to be replaced by AI, because a computer can't do one of the most important parts of our job.
Another important part of our job is that I think this was mentioned before, is correlating that a finding on a mammogram, correlates to the ultrasound finding, and, also matches with an MR finding. And that's very difficult also for AI to make those jumps in the different modalities.
And also what we were talking about earlier, or we were talking about at some point, where, we're not just thinking when we read a diagnostic mammogram and there are several findings, we're not just thinking about what to do with one finding. We're thinking about, okay, what do I want to do with all these findings given what I think the one is, and what's the next step? Do I biopsy here or there? Because that's going to be what changes management. So there's a lot of nuances, I think, that AI would have a lot of difficulty figuring out.
I love the way you all articulate the role of a breast radiologist, because it sounds so sophisticated. It's really cool to hear this from somebody else's perspective, but it is meticulous work, it's sophisticated work, it's painstaking work, and it's, you know, all driven by the patient that's behind all of it. So it's really cool to see this articulated so well. So how can someone who's interested in radiology explore their interest in the field? Or let me say, how can someone who's interested in breast radiology explore their interest in the field? Let's say they're a first-year radiologist, or they are a different radiologist, a different specialist right now, and would like to perhaps switch.
I think starting by shadowing a breast radiologist is always a good idea. So you can really see, besides this conversation, you can really see what we do day to day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I think before you commit to something, it's good to get more information about it. And really, I think the only way is to see people in action doing that job.
Yeah. And I'll put in a plug for the annual meeting, the Society of Breast Imaging meeting every year, typically in May. Next year it's in National Harbor in the Maryland, DC area. I think being around some of the conversations that we have and some of our hot topics, areas of interest, help you know, okay, is this something I can do for the rest of my life? Do I find this really stimulating or not? I think that that's really, really beneficial. And we only have a few minutes here. So, you know, as we round up, I want to give you all a chance to say anything that you have on your mind. Why do you think that breast radiology is best? What do you want people to take away from this conversation?
I think what I would take away from this conversation is do what you're passionate about. Because, you know, there'll be several obstacles in the way, but if you do that, you're going to be happy in the end. And breast imaging, get to know what breast imaging is if you're making that branch point decision. Am I doing radiology? Am I doing, what subspecialty am I going into? Get to know it and find something you're passionate about. And if that's breast imaging, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I agree with all those points. And just remember, if you are a radiology resident or a medical student looking into radiology, and the one thing you feel is missing a little bit is that patient contact, don't just assume that IR is the only option for you. Make sure that you spend a lot of time in breast imaging before you decide to apply to an IR residency if you're a medical student.
I just recently was having a conversation with a girlfriend who's also a breast imager, and somebody had asked her, you know, she was making a career change a little bit, and somebody had asked her, how much money do you need to make? And she's like, honestly, if my bills were taken care of, I would do this for free. Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way. You know, I would do this for free. If I'm taking, you know, more than a week off from work, I miss it. I miss being in that room. And I think finding something that you love so much that you would do it for free, that means you're doing something right. You know, it's a long career, you know, and if you love it, that's how you're going to make it through your career, and without burning out, without being dissatisfied. And that's how you make it through the hard days, because there will be hard days no matter what. But really loving something and feeling like that it's meaningful, that's easy to do in breast imaging.
Yeah, I agree. I think ultimately, you know, someone gave me advice once when I was, I think in residency, and they said, you know, figure out the worst part of the job that you want and think, can you live with that? You know, so I thought through different subspecialties, and I was like, neuro, okay, neurofibromatosis, head and neck, spine, MR, like that was, I was like, ooh, that would be a lot to do. So thinking through that, and I thought, what is the worst part of breast imaging? It's probably either the neglected cancer or the recurrent cancer. It was always patient-centered. It wasn't ever that there was a part of the job itself that I thought, oh, this is just untenable. It was always something because I felt for the patient in that moment. And I thought, yeah, I mean, that's hard. That's a hard part of a job, but it's a gift to be able to be with someone in a sensitive time. So overall, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be a breast radiologist and grateful to you all for joining us in this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Toma.
Thank you, Toma.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This will be posted online, but you can catch us next week for another one of our installments of the SBI Summer Series. So thank you all for joining us.
Have a good night.
Good night.